All right, welcome to GothCast, episode 41. I am Dr. Sanders.
And I'm Robbie Gore.
And today we're going to be talking about a band that's been requested a lot of times.
Yeah, and a band that we've been wanting to do for a long time, but we really haven't found, the right way to do it. I think we've kind of finally nailed it down.
Yeah, so I'll just say this band is Specimen.
Yep.
And
I'm sure many of you know who Specimen are.
Yeah, and their association with the Batcave and how they owned it.
Yep.
We're the house band for the Batcave in the 80s.
Many people know the name Johnny Slut.
Yeah, who basically defined the now known as death rock image with Death Hawk and the...
He invented the Death Hawk.
Yeah.
And,
And that's kind of an interesting thing, too, is one thing I want to talk about right off the bat with Specimen is their sound.
Yeah.
And I know that, people really like Specimen, or at least there's a lot of people who know about Specimen, right? And maybe a few of their songs, probably, the top two are Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
They're definitely one of those bands who gets major goth and death rock cred for being associated with the Batcave, much like Alien Sex Fiend does.
Yes. And I'll say right off the bat, I do like Specimen more than I like Alien Sex Fiend.
I do too.
But I have to say, in listening to these albums in depth, because, we're doing the episode and everything, like I already have, even if you watch, our YouTube videos, you already know that I already have Specimen albums and some Specimen releases inside of my collection. One, Specimen never released a full album when they were together initially in the 80s.
What they're most famous for is releasing Batastrophe, which is essentially a long EP or a mini album.
Yeah, Batastrophe, not like catastrophe, but bats.
Yep.
Batastrophe is probably what most people would think of, and it's really only a few songs.
It's also the most representative of what they were like during the time.
And in my personal opinion, I think that they are more of a blend of like glam rock and kind of spooky elements.
I would definitely agree. For me, I see Specimen as kind of a proto-goth band. I wouldn't put them in, the blatant category of calling them goth or death rock, but I think that a lot of those things wouldn't exist without them, and I definitely see the major influences from glam and even, things like hair metal, at the time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think Ian Astbury put it really well, who was someone who frequented the Batcave, so, saw Specimen often.
Yeah.
But he said that seeing Specimen was a lot like seeing, punk and glam come together, and it was like a death Bowie, as he called it. Yeah.
I know that even they themselves, in interviews and stuff, they said, after they'd been out for a few years and doing some touring and things like that, reviewers would constantly compare them to other acts, and they would say, yes, we've been compared to T-Rex, David Bowie, Kiss, Van Halen, like
New York Dolls.
I think, there are some similarities in a lot of those things. I think that the music is better than a lot of those bands.
Yeah, well, it does have darker undertones to it, and I do see them as being very influential for both the goth and death rock scene, and that they help define the image. Yeah, I think a big reason that they are so largely associated with the gothic scene is because of the Batcave, because, two of their members, owned the Batcave. So we had Ollie Wisdom and John Klein were the owners of the Batcave and the people who ran it every night. And the Batcave,
it's cred.
Yeah, it definitely gives them cred. We even have some, mixed opinions about the Batcave and, how influential it was to goth. But it's undeniable that it certainly helped bring a spotlight to gothic music and dark subculture music.
Yeah, I think it was David J. Who said it. I think it was somebody from Bauhaus. It was either David J. or Kevin Haskins. I'm pretty sure it was David J. But he was talking about his time at the Batcave and Specimen and Alien Sex Fiend specifically. Yeah, and he said that they adopted the term more for themselves to try and be part of the scene, whereas with bands like Bauhaus and stuff, it was thrust upon us. Yeah. Unwillingly, and it fit a little bit better. Yeah. So even people within that scene have a little bit of a, different opinion, or some people have different opinions of how extremely goth or death rock they are in terms of sound. But yeah, I think that what they did was actually really good, and I know that we're going to talk about some of it. And the Giant Slut helped define the death rock look. And
I think another thing to note is, while they might not have been the gothiest goth band, you could argue that other proto-goth bands contributed more to the sound than they did. I definitely think that they are largely responsible for creating the aesthetic of it, and particularly for death rock in particular. I'm not gonna say that. Particularly for death rock, and also just because they allowed an outlet for a lot of these bands to come and create a scene for themselves. I know there was other bands or there was other clubs at the time who were trying to create a scene, but in the end, this is the one that everybody remembers. This is the one that lasted, that brought. Not to say that it's lasted till today, but it's lasted in our memories, and
that's all support, right?
Yep. But it's a club that brought a lot of people to goth music and death rock and just the subculture in general. Yeah,
and so the way that we're gonna do it is because the way that we're gonna be doing the albums is a little different than we would normally do, because, like we said, Specimen never had an official album released when they were a band,
at least before they reunited.
Yeah.
And even then we'll talk about it, but there's iffy.
Yeah. So there was this compilation that came out called Azoic.
Yep.
And I think it was in the late 90s, in like 97. And what it did is it compiled pretty much all the songs besides the Indestructible single that was released. So you got most of the songs that they had written, and some unreleased tracks were released live on it at the end of the album.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to kind of look at it retrospectively, because it's kind of like if they had an album, what it might sound like altogether. And so I think that's a good thing to look at. So let's take a look at Azoic, which includes Batastrophe and all their different singles and everything like that.
And we will talk about Batastrophe. But,
Yeah, well, we kind of are if we're talking about this.
Yeah.
It's really, So just Azoic. Look it up. So, when talking about these songs, I really like a few of these songs.
Yeah.
Some... I gotta say, with Azoic, I'll get it right off the bat. The live songs at the end of this album are my least favorite songs on here, just because they're kind of scratchy. They were basically just thrown on here, because it was the only versions they could find of them or something like that. And they're kind of scratchy 1983 recordings. But I really like the Specimen sound.
I gotta say right off the bat, not entirely sure what your opinion is on them, but I gotta say, I went into this, I always, kind of liked Specimen, but didn't listen to a lot of them because there's not a lot of, content out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Batastrophe, and obviously I've heard that and I like it.
Yeah.
But really getting into like the video footage and watching them, I think I kind of fell in love with them a little bit. Like, they're a really awesome band and really fun to watch. And their sound is just, I think the best way to describe it is fun. Like,
yeah, I very much agree that it is a very fun type of album and very fun type of music. And it's so funny that they are so, especially Johnny Slut, is so very much associated with death rock, because I don't really hear that much death rock sound, at least what we know or what people would classify as death rock today. I feel like is not that present on this.
I would agree. I think the main reason is because he kind of invented what is the stereotypical look for death rock, which is the death hawk and the fishnets and the makeup and then that's been a staple for death rock bands since.
One of the songs I want to talk about first is Dead Man's Auto Chop.
Yeah,
I really like it. It's like heavy. It's a really good song. And it was included on the Batcave compilation.
Yeah.
I think it's called Young Limbs and Numb Hymns. Great way to start off that album. And actually, this leads us to something that's a little bit confusing, because I'm talking about that album. where that song comes from.
Yeah.
Specimen actually is sometimes credited as the Specimen.
Yeah. Sometimes by themselves.
Yeah, sometimes by themselves, because they will call themselves the Specimen and then just call themselves Specimen.
It does seem to be sort of like an affectation of just the way they pronounce things, because if you go and watch interviews with them, they pretty much refer to every band as the whatever.
Yeah.
They'll be like I don't know, the alien sex fiend or something like
the alien sex fiend. Yeah.
But it just kind of seems like something that slipped through the cracks for them. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't pay a lot of attention to whether or not they said Specimen or the Specimen.
Yeah. And then, of course, getting right off to probably the most famous song they ever did, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yep. So this is pretty much an anthem for goth nights. Anytime you go out to...
Absolutely.
Especially some of the smaller clubs who are more into death rock and less into industrial music, you're really gonna hear this song spun.
Yes, definitely. Every single time we go out, like you're gonna hear Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, like that opening bass line, just that do 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 do, like that big fat bass line in the beginning. It's
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
I know. I really really love this song.
I will say the vocals do remind me a little bit of like sort of Christian deathy kind of vocals on this song.
Yeah,
it's kind of Roz Williams.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Actually, I would say Ollie Wisdom's vocals, are really all over the place.
He spans a lot of different styles.
Yeah,
and that is something that they're notorious for. Like if you look at any of their genre listings for even like Discogs or Wikipedia, Amazon, they're listed as either glam or goth rock or death rock.
Sometimes a little bit of new wave. Yep. And I think his voice is largely responsible for giving that unique sound.
Yeah.
Because if they do a sparse track, like, just not loud overlays or anything like that, or, doing the big chorus or anything like that, then it has a totally different sound, and his voice adapts to each kind of thing. And I feel like with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, it's a little bit more hard edge and a little more punk in that way. But then you have songs like The Beauty of Poison,
which is it's very 80s.
Very 80s, almost hair metal sounding.
It's kind of the thing that we would almost make fun of, but this song is so great in this whimsical way I can't help but just love it when it comes on. Like, just da na na da na da na da.
Yeah, it's
The Beauty of Poison.
Yeah, I it does seem like one of those things which we would both probably hate.
Yeah.
And probably make fun of, say, oh man, it's so 80s. But this is just fine. It treads that really fine line of just good, fun time songwriting to catchiness.
Yeah.
This song will burrow its way into your head.
Oh yeah.
And like never leave. You'll be humming the da na na da da. Yeah, it's
I will say I think that part of the fun of this band and these songs are really that Specimen doesn't seem like they take themselves very seriously at the time. They pretty much would just in every interview, duck questions just to play characters. It really seemed like they were having fun, and it seemed like the point of Specimen was just to get up and play some music and get other people to play some music. It doesn't seem like there were a lot of pressure to be one style or another. And just because I feel like they were just like, whatever, yeah, sure, we're goth. I don't know, like in recent years I could definitely see them trying to claim themselves as goth, but you go back and watch footage from the time, they never call themselves goth. I don't
even know what to call themselves.
I don't think they knew what to call themselves either.
So Hex, song I really enjoy. I think this is kind of where it has a little bit more of the spooky vibe.
Yeah, definitely.
Then
like we said before, they do seem to span a lot of different genres. So it is hard to place them, specifically into some little niche. I definitely know, or I'll definitely say that they're incredibly influential on the gothic scene. Whether or not they are goth, you guys can decide for yourselves.
Exactly.
But this song, I would definitely agree, it leans a little more towards the spooky side of things.
Yeah, and I think it works really well. And they didn't do as much of this kind of music, which is weird. I mean, because
they did more of the Beauty is Poison style.
Yeah,
stuff.
well, a good example is Returning from a Journey.
Yep.
Which was kind of the other sort of single that they launched right at the beginning. And yeah, it has that super 80s sound, and it's really good.
Yeah.
I don't like it as much as, Beauty of Poison or Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, but I think it's a good other single. And actually, that's one of the reasons I think that the Azoic compilation is actually really good, is because they're not just cherry picking songs that from 6 albums that were good.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all singles.
Yeah.
So they all have their own catchiness to them and good things about them. I really like Syria,
Syria's a great track.
Which really reminds me of like the like something like The Damned or something like that would do.
Yeah.
Because it has that sort of like jaunty, like, Syria.
Yeah.
I really, really like that. Way more punk to me than, some of their stuff.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Specimen I kind of see as a punk band who kind of like took up a glam moniker just for the sake of, I don't know, fun. Like, that's what it seems like. Mm-hmm. And, not everything on Azoic is amazing. I like most of it.
I totally think so. I think,
I will say, I think I do like all the Batastrophe songs that are on here. Like, I can't say that I really dislike any songs on Batastrophe.
Yeah, I agree with that. Pretty much every song on there is really good. And pretty much the only things that on Azoic that I don't really like are the end songs, like Wolverine.
Yeah, the 2 live songs.
Yeah, because they're just really bad quality.
Yeah.
But everything else, especially the tracks from Batastrophe and singles and stuff, I do wish Indestructible was on here. Yeah. Which that's one of the reasons I want to talk about Azoic specifically. Yeah. Because I think it's the best way to get pretty much what they did. I mean, pretty much it's a capsule of Specimen.
Well, it's a capsule of Batastrophe kind of era Specimen.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we get into the later albums, it is really much a very different thing.
Yes.
And so if you're looking for what is prime, Specimen, heyday Specimen, this is probably the best way to get it.
Yeah. And if you're looking to pick up the vinyl for Specimen, you can find a lot of it, pretty decently cheap.
Yeah, Batastrophe's not particularly expensive if you want to own that.
Yeah, Batastrophe is very affordable.
Yeah.
To get on vinyl. Just keep in mind you're getting 6 songs,
which isn't bad for what I would consider an EP, even though it was released as an LP.
Yeah, it's kind of in that weird middle ground. But all the other singles, like Indestructible, some of them, depending on the condition, can run a little bit high, especially because you're really getting 2 songs per thing, and
they are expensive for singles. They run about $20 usually. I see them. Which I don't know. I guess it's not incredibly bad if you're just trying to complete, your collection. If you want, Batastrophe and then you want the singles, you're not going to spend a ton of money getting a Specimen collection.
I would say Indestructible does have the best art.
It does.
That's the one that has. I almost bought it one time. It was $25, and I was like, 2 songs. That's that's the only thing. And then I ended up, because I bought Batastrophe for $7.
I will say Batastrophe's art's pretty cool though.
I think it's cool. Yeah, I think maybe I'm just so sick of looking at it. I think that's the only reason. Is I not only I see it all the time, but I listen to that album a lot. So I think it's not as kind of ooh. But yeah, I like the Batastrophe artwork, the kind of cartoon versions of them. So I really recommend Batastrophe and the Azoic compilation. Mm-hmm. I think if you're just looking for, and also Azoic's on Spotify in America. I don't know if it is in other countries, but that's a great way to listen to it. It's
definitely,
and it has pretty much every Specimen song that you want to know from the 80s on it.
Yep.
And yeah, I think, if you can pick that up or find a way to hear those songs from either Batastrophe or Azoic, you can have a good time. I mean, it's fun, kind of party-ish, a little bit spooky.
I will say, I feel like, I don't know, bands like 45 Grave try to do party anthems. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like they necessarily succeeded in necessarily having super party anthems. They're good songs. I love 45 Grave, especially, their debut album.
Mm-hmm. Sleepy Safety is awesome.
Yeah. However, I feel like Specimen really is the party album or I know they're not an album, but, their collection of music, whether it be Azoic or you take Catastrophe and the Singles, which is essentially Azoic.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that is the party CD or album for goth.
Yeah, it's much more the let's drink a beer goth album and less of the let's drink some wine and dark low light kind of thing. It's more like
it's
let's
not
dance,
Yeah. And I got to give him credit because as much as I enjoy pondering a spooky goth album and being very mysterious, I feel like there aren't really a lot of party anthems for goth. There's a lot of, anthems that are associated with gothic music that people get very excited about when they come on, but they usually aren't like crazy upbeat like dance songs. This album really is like kind of like, I feel like if you heard it come on, at a club, you grab your friends, drag to the dance floor, like let's dance this song.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, that's actually really evident with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang whenever we see it. So, but yeah, I really recommend it, and just know what you're getting into. It's a little bit different.
Yeah,
and I'm actually in preparation for this episode.
Yeah,
I did talk with some fans about Specimen because, like I said, this was requested a lot.
Yeah.
And it was very strange, the differences I got from people. Some people like, I just can't stand Specimen. All I hear of them is 80s glam metal. And some people are like, oh, I just love Specimen because they're just so unique. And it's just the shift of people, like, is crazy.
I think it's kind of similar to Alien Sex Fiend in terms of, who's in what camp. A lot of people like love Alien Sex Fiend. A lot of people can't stand them. I do feel like, this band also has that sort of polarizing sound about them. I find myself in the camp where I have to admit I kind of love Specimen. I know they're not the gothest band out there, but
no.
I don't know. I just, something about it is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. All right, one of the other things we want to mention here is there is another compilation that we know about called Wet Warm Cling Film Red Velvet Crush.
Yeah. Released the same year as Azoic.
It has some different live tracks.
Yeah.
And I guess what's supposed to be the original version of Ooze.
Yeah.
I still like the other version better. And it has the song Wet Warm Cling Film Red Velvet Crush.
Yeah.
So it's basically just the same album but different live tracks.
Which potentially kind of makes it better, but part of the reason we went with Azoic is just because it's in bigger circulation, more people are familiar with it.
Yeah.
Warm Wet Cling is not as easy to get your hands on, and not as many people are gonna know about it.
Exactly. So just in case anybody's wondering why we picked Azoic over.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're on to recent interesting goth stuff,
aka Riggs.
And today we have stories of differing interests, I guess.
Yeah. That's sort of the point in this segment.
Yeah. I know some people don't like Morrissey or the Smiths, but I love Morrissey and the Smiths, so we're talking about Morrissey and the Smiths.
Uh-huh.
I thought this was kind of funny. I know Morrissey has had a whole bunch of controversial stuff going on right now where he's writing open letters to prime ministers and he's saying Brexit is like amazing or something, and
real classy guy.
Yeah, all this stuff. And then I just thought this was a little bit more lighthearted than that because I don't want to get into that whole kind of thing. I thought it was funny that Johnny Marr has said that he has never read Morrissey's autobiography, and if anybody knows, Morrissey's autobiography is like really popular.
Yeah.
It was like a bestseller and all stuff.
Why would he need to though? I feel like if anyone knows the story of Morrissey, it's Johnny Marr.
Yeah, that's true. But he said that he didn't want to read it. Yeah. He still hasn't read it because he is writing his own book, or I think he just released his own book. And he said, I didn't want to influence my book, to make basically my book a response to his book.
Yep.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think that's a genuine. I think that's genuinely a good idea.
Yeah. Also thought it was really funny that in a recent news story they were saying that the Smiths almost got back together.
Yep.
Like they almost did.
Yeah, supposedly there was talks about it, but I don't know. There's always talks about.
Right? Yeah, there's always. And it didn't happen. So, and it was years ago. They said in 2008, like we sat down and for like a week or 4 days, it seemed like we're really going to do it. And then we just didn't.
Yeah. Well, every time they've almost gotten back together, it's usually been because there was a lot of money on the table, and they usually end up turning it down because they don't need the money.
Yeah. And then the other news story, well, one of the other news stories that we're going to talk about is Lol Tolhurst from The Cure. You know, we talked about him quite a bit when we did our Cure episodes. He released a memoir, a book called Cured, The Tale of Two Imaginary Boys. And it's basically this whole thing about like his experience in The Cure and his friendship with Robert Smith.
Yeah.
And his struggle with alcoholism and
him leaving the band.
Yeah. Being kicked out like right around when they made Disintegration. And
what it was like to deal with his alcoholism and, you know, the fallout of his life, essentially.
Mm-hmm. He talks about how David Bowie's Low like really influenced 17 Seconds.
Yeah.
And in his favorite Cure album, guess what his favorite Cure album is?
What?
It's Pornography. So
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, you can pick it up. I'm gonna pick it up. I haven't picked it up. But I'm gonna pick it up.
I also really want the Bauhaus coffee table book.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's so expensive.
I know. I feel like though, for what it is, I'm willing to spend the $60 on it because I know it's gonna be like $500.
Oh man, I've spent like $200 on a book, so I'm not even the right person to ask. I thought that was interesting, and it's our story. So lots of Smiths. I love Smiths. I love Morrissey. What was the news story? Lol Tolhurst's book. So let's get back to music. Okay, so now we're going to take a really weird turn in history.
Yeah. So Specimen wasn't active for a very long period of time.
Pretty much throughout the 90s.
Yeah.
And I think it was like 89 or something when they stopped being like really active. And Ollie went on and did his own thing. And basically the band members split up, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, John Klein, the guitarist, was like, okay, I'm going to make a new lineup of Specimen, you know?
Yeah, and he basically pulled, you know, various members that they'd had in the band at different points during their touring cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have the 2007 album,
Electric Ballroom.
Yep.
And this is a very strange album because of that. It really doesn't resemble the Specimen of yesteryear.
Yeah.
Not to say it's bad. It just doesn't sound
It doesn't have the same energy. You know, I don't know. When I listen to Catastrophe or, you know, Azoic for that matter, it just sounds like the band's ready to just explode out of my speakers.
Yeah.
And, you know, while they still kind of retain some of their elements and songwriting, you know, textures and tendencies for this album, it just doesn't have quite the same energy to it. And that could be because of production. But it also is probably largely due to the fact that, you know, it's not the band that we are familiar with when we think of Specimen.
Yeah. I will say that Ollie Wisdom and Johnny Slut are on this album, but just in very small doses.
Yeah, Ollie Wisdom's on like 2 tracks, and Johnny Slut's only on 1.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Johnny Slut does keyboard, and for his song, he's not super heavily.
I did want to touch on that, the whole Johnny Slut thing. We didn't really mention it when we were talking about their formation, but I do think it's incredibly interesting to note that, for one, Johnny Slut is the most famous member of the band, even though he is not their singer. He's their keyboard player.
Yeah.
And he was recruited to be in the band mostly because of his look. He didn't know how to play any instruments at the time, and he didn't want to join because of that, but eventually learned to play the keyboard by putting stickers on his keyboard that let him know what notes he was playing.
Yep. That's right.
That's how he joined Specimen.
Yep, exactly.
Just felt like that was some interesting trivia.
I think that's pretty interesting trivia. But yeah, getting back to Electric Ballroom, I do like the way this album sounds. I will say that there's some catchy, good songs, even if they aren't kind of what you want or what you're expecting. I think that songs like Fatal Error, you have like this really happy sounding kind of almost punk like, or almost like pop punk in a way that it's so catchy and just kind of mixed really in your face. So lead singer of for most of this album is this guy named T. Bias.
Yeah, and he was a former member of Specimen, so he's part of one of their incarnations when they were playing.
Yeah, and I like his vocals. They're a lot more throaty and a lot more deep, kind of.
I will say, if I hadn't known it was T. Bias, it does sound kind of like, Ollie Wisdom, if he had aged a bit.
That's what I thought, too. I was like, when I first heard this album, because before we did all, the research on it, you just kind of pull up albums and you're like, oh, they did a reunion album. Yeah. And it says Specimen and the same logo and all that stuff. So you're like, you expect it to be probably, if anything, it's usually the same singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really question it before. I was like, oh, it sounds different, but okay. But then you learn this different singer. And it's like, okay, he's still good.
Yeah.
I mean, and Ollie Wisdom, it's very obvious when it is Ollie Wisdom. Whenever you hear him, you're like, oh, okay, that sounds more like him. It's definitely the same kind of sound, but way deeper.
Yeah.
But there are some kind of moments on this album.
There are. It is unfortunate because, there was such a long period of time. You would hope that their comeback would be a bit bigger than it was. But I don't know. I will say I do like this album in that it kind of brought them back together.
Mm-hmm.
The next album is another thing. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But, for having not really had any contact and this album essentially spawned the reformation of Specimen, I think that's pretty cool. But it does have its flaws, like you said.
Yeah. I think the song Cinema of Attractions, it's one of the ones that has Ollie's vocals on it.
Yeah.
I think they're really good. They layer his vocals. They have a long build up to different pieces of song.
The instrumentation is really good on that song.
I think the instrumentation is really good on this album, actually.
I would agree.
But you do have some generic songs, I gotta say, and I think this album does have a little bit more of like the hard rock, like kind of modern rock sort of sound in some songs.
Well, I could see that happening just because I don't know. When this album was released, obviously we have much more modern production today.
Mm-hmm.
And using modern equipment, which they probably did because they don't seem like the type of people who keep vintage equipment around.
No.
They had a very 80s hair metal guitar sound before. And the modern equivalent of that is, probably something along the lines of hard rock.
Yeah. Example of kind of generic songs are like Play Pray and Aftershock, which I just felt were just pretty generic.
Yeah. I didn't really care for the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang remix.
Oh my gosh, I forgot that was even on this album. Yeah. I don't like I do not like that song. It's this really weird like electronic like version of the song, which it's called like Kisses Bang Bang, like Specimen versus whatever.
It's called Specimen versus or Kisses Bang Bang Specimen versus Atomizer.
Yeah, it's not a very good version of a song.
Yeah, and that's the one that Johnny Slut played on.
Yeah, but you do have some songs I really enjoyed. Actually, the song White Space I thought was really good. It sounds like an Oasis song, though.
Sounds like David Bowie meets Oasis. Like kind of David Bowie talk singy vocals and then a very Oasis sounding, track.
Yeah, it's piano and strings and all this kind of stuff.
I like Nothing Lasts Forever, actually.
I thought it was okay. I didn't like the vocals as much.
Fair enough. I just thought the instrumentation for that track was pretty cool.
Yeah. Ticket to Oblivion is the other Ollie Wisdom song.
Yeah.
And I liked it. It's just really dancey, almost like a dance club song. Like modern dance club, not like 80s dance club. Like
I did find myself liking the Ollie Wisdom tracks on this album less than a lot of the other songs.
It feels like the ones with the other singer, T. Bias, were a little bit more fleshed out and a little bit better written. I think if the same thing if Ollie had sung them, it probably would have been really good too.
Yeah, it perhaps could have been the fact that from what I can tell and from what I've read, it does seem like John Klein just barely got Wisdom and Johnny Slut to come in and just do collaborations on these two tracks really quickly. Perhaps if they had more time to work on them, they would have had a better take. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But yeah, they feel a little less polished.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And overall, this album, while a little bit generic in some ways, it's not that bad. I mean, I'll say this: I probably never would have listened to this album, or it really wouldn't have piqued my interest if I'd heard like the first few songs. If I didn't think it was Specimen or something.
Yeah, if I heard this album and I didn't know it had any correlation to Specimen or was Specimen in any way, I probably wouldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
Being a big Specimen fan and knowing that this album exists, I guess a little bit more forgiving of it, I suppose. Perhaps I shouldn't be. I don't know. It isn't a perfect album, but most bands who have this long of an absence in their, career before putting out a full-length album usually don't have a particularly good release.
Yeah, I think the fact that this one's okay is good enough for me.
Yeah. Well, if you look at a lot of other bands who put out albums in this, era.
Bauhaus's Go Away White.
Yeah. Or, even some of the Cure's material,
I should be talking about my boy. I should be talking about my lover.
I love the Cure, man. But, their last couple albums were,
fighting words.
They were just all right.
You best be moving on. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to recommend Electric Ballroom. I don't know. I don't think
for a enjoyment purpose I would recommend this, but if you're like a diehard Specimen fan
and curious
and you really want like everything that they have and you want to own their entire collection, then sure, go for it. I think that I think this is better than the next album.
You think so?
I think so.
Well, which one? Because we're gonna talk about the. Never mind. Well, yeah. Okay. So, that's Electric Ballroom. Just geez, you're gonna have to make up your own mind on this one because this one's weird. So
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to be talking about a live album. Why are we talking about a live album?
Okay. Well, partially because this is a pretty good release, and secondly because there's not a lot of Specimen content.
Yeah. And the final reason that we're talking about it, at least in this order, it's the third album we're talking about. It's live album. Usually we talk about live albums at the end or something like that. But this was released 1 year after Electric Ballroom, so 2008.
Yeah. And this was spawned by Electric Ballroom. This is, essentially the representation of them, reuniting and then wanting to put something out.
Original lineup Specimen.
Yep.
This is from the 80s Specimen.
Yeah, the original lineup.
Yeah, getting together to record a live album, and even has some pretty interesting songs in here that I really like.
By the way, I just would like to clarify in the last segment when I said I liked that album more than the next album. I was not referring to this. I was referring to the next studio album just because I grouped them separately.
Yeah.
Yes, so back to this album.
Yeah, so I really like this album for what it is. I think that one of the best things that Specimen had going for them was their energy, especially,
definitely.
And I think that this actually brings across the old songs in a new way and in some ways a better way.
I would agree. It's a little bit more serious than perhaps some of their old live performances. I still feel like they keep, the level of camp and fun up, but I do feel like this is very representative of old Specimen. And so for me, I kind of feel like if I'm recommending something new by Specimen, this is the album I'm going with.
I will agree.
Yep.
But yeah, you do have the song Ooze.
Yep.
And I really like that song. So you get like one, kind of new thing. But it's pretty much all older songs and taken from previous albums.
Which makes sense given that it's a live album. And I know a lot of people would want to hear, basically Catastrophe era,
right?
Specimen, considering it had been so long since, the original lineup had toured.
Yeah, and they do a good job, Ollie's voice is much, much lower.
Yeah,
and
it's definitely deepened over the years.
A little weaker too, but they make up for it with the energy throughout this performance.
I really do feel like that is Specimen's selling point.
Yeah.
Is just that they put on an amazing show.
Yeah. And I like pretty much all the songs that I liked before. I think really work here. Like Beauty of Poison.
Yep.
It's a great version. Yeah, the vocals are a little messy. Yes, that is true. On all these songs, like they're a little sloppy.
They're rough around the edges.
You know, but that's what works. That's why it works. You know, Telltale, Hex. I love Dead Man's Auto Chop. Like,
I would compare it to, you know, like a live performance by the Damned today. You know, the Damned, you know, are a great band. Captain Sensible is a really good guitar player, but you know, their, you know, general sound is kind of rough around the edges live. But I don't think it takes away from it really.
No, I think that's what works. And when you listen to this album, that's what you're gonna get. And yeah, like maybe some of the songs are a little bit less catchy because of that. Like Syria, I feel like Syria is a, you know, because the way that song was mixed and recorded before is what made it really catchy. Not only the structure, but you know, just the way that that sounded.
Yeah.
But this version, not my favorite version of Syria.
Yeah.
But you know, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang it
still rings
great.
True. Yeah.
The closer, Returning from a Journey, really awesome. And it does make the songs feel a little less 80s.
Yeah.
And a little,
it does modernize them a bit. Yeah.
A little, it definitely makes some of the songs less dated.
Yeah.
And you know, it could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your opinion of Specimen songs. Some of them I would prefer the studio versions, I'll say.
Yeah.
But as a live album, I think this is great. And I just really like the song Ooze.
Yeah.
I really like that song on this album.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I probably on most of the points he said, you know, there are studio versions that I do prefer to this album. But, you know, for a live album, I think that this is great. I think it's very indicative of what Specimen is and what they represented. And I think it's successful in that, you know, when you put on a live album, it should make you want to go and see that band.
Yeah.
And when I put this on, I want to see Specimen.
That's totally true.
I really want like there to be an original Specimen lineup show happening like a month from now, and I want to be able to hear them play, you know, Catastrophe era stuff. And I don't know. I think it works really well in that regard.
Yeah. In case anybody's ever wondering why it's called Alive at the Batcave, I don't think it's at the same location.
It's not.
Yeah. So they basically just kind of did a reunion show at a new place.
They kind of made it like the new Batcave for a night, basically.
Yeah.
It's kind of akin to when, you know, you have a goth night and it's named after a famous club.
Yeah. So it's just named after the specific night kind of thing. And then I will say some people said like, oh, you know, Specimen aren't cheesy or they don't like, you know, they don't like some of the, you know, they're not like that 80s or whatever. This album is pink, white, and black.
Specimen, you know, as much as I love them, I will not defend the point that they aren't cheesy or that they aren't, you know, ridiculous. I think that they know that they are. You know, some people might argue with me on that. But I think that they are well aware of their camp factor, and I think it works for them. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's cool. So if you want to hear basically some alternate versions of some songs that are really classic in a new way, you know, a little grittier, I really recommend this album. It's really mixed really well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really recommend it.
I think it really captures the spirit of Specimen.
Yeah. So that's Specimen, Alive at the Batcave.
Yep.
Okay, and now we come to our final album to talk about with Specimen.
Yeah.
And this, for me, is kind of a downer. I don't know.
Yeah. So this was the album I was referencing earlier when I said their next album I didn't think was as good.
Yeah.
So Electric Ballroom.
Yeah, this is Wake the Dead. It was released in 2013.
Yep.
You have Johnny Sled is again out of the band.
Yeah.
He's officially retired, I think they said at this time. And, you know, this album has some okay songs.
Yeah.
But I just think they went in the wrong direction.
I would agree with you. It unfortunately just feels too modern. It feels like they tried to really modernize their sound.
Added a little bit of industrial elements.
Yeah.
It's just...
They went a lot darker, which isn't necessarily bad, but I always felt like, you know, one of Specimen's selling points was the camp factor and the fact that it wasn't overly dark.
They went darker in like it's a weird way. They didn't go dark in that like, oh, just lyrical content or something like that. They went dark in like, yeah, we're metal, you know, like kind of thing, like industrial metal.
It's a more abrasive album.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it works. I mean, even, you know, the the opening track, Wake the Dead, it's kind of this weird mix of electronica and metal, and kind of almost a lot of this actually really reminds me of if somebody did almost like a budget 9 Inch Nails kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where they're trying to mix the keyboards and the metal in like a really strange way. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But you do have these songs that I think are good, and I guess I'll get them out of the way right now just because it's only really 2. I think the song Car Crash is good.
Car Crash is good.
It has like a kind of generic guitar riff, the big chorus, but I think it works well together. And the other one is New Religion, which I think is the closest this album gets to actually a Specimen song.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I really wanted this to be a great return to Specimen, especially considering that they seem to do it really well with the live album. Mm-hmm. Clearly they're capable of at least performing their old material, in a very Specimen manner. I just kind of hope that they would have written their new material in the same or similar vein.
Yeah, exactly. And I get it, that this is a completely different lineup than from Electric Ballroom, and it had been a long time since they had come back and revisited this band for new material.
Yeah.
And it's just weird. You have a song Too Much Bondage, which just is mixed weird. It's really repetitive.
It's okay. I don't hate Too Much Bondage. It's I feel like that's the biggest problem with this album. Like, there's nothing on here that I hate. I just find it a bit boring, which is sometimes a worse crime.
I always say, what's the worst? I say it all the time. The worst thing can be is boring.
Sometimes.
Well, I mean, for an album.
well,
yeah. You have songs like Demons Are a Ghoul's Best Friend, which sounds awesome, but it's just like industrial metal.
Yeah.
You have a song called Every Day is Halloween, which is not a cover.
No.
It's just a generic metal song.
They apparently weren't aware of the song Every Day is Halloween.
Yeah. One of the Haunted House is almost a good song.
Yeah.
It has some the slow parts I like a lot.
Haunted House, it is very polarizing, and the choruses are very metal. But then the verses have these beautiful, haunting...
slow melodies. It's really cool. I like the way the vocals sit over it and everything. But I think this album went, in too much into, hey, we got to make this big, modern sound. Listeners now want this big sound. And, sometimes the vocals get drowned out because they're just
What it reminds me of a little bit is kind of Pick Your Poison by 45 Grave, and that it is... kind of like this ultra modern mix for what was a very 80s band, and it didn't really lend itself to it, and I find a similar situation with this band.
I think that's a pretty good comparison. It's just it just doesn't do it that well. It seems like it's the wrong direction, the wrong kind of mixing style, the wrong type of energy for the band.
It also doesn't feel like there's a cohesive sound for this album. I would say the majority of it's more metal-y, but it does seem to go in a few different directions. It doesn't seem entirely like they know what they want to do with this album.
Yeah, I agree. This album actually was funded with pledge music.
Yeah.
So fans did support them for this, which is good. But I just didn't find really anything in this album that I would come back to unless
I have to agree with you, unfortunately. I wouldn't have even found me listening to this record if it wasn't a Specimen record, and I probably won't listen to it again, really.
Yep, I totally agree with that.
I hate to say that, I really do.
I do too. I mean, it's a bummer because Electric Ballroom actually has some pretty good songs especially compared to this. Electric Ballroom, I think, is a way better album than this.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot because Electric Ballroom's kind of generic.
Yeah.
And
far less so than this album.
Yeah. But that doesn't even really have the Specimen feel or vibe, but it's better musically.
Yeah. It's got some cool songs and stuff that I would consider throwing on a Specimen playlist, perhaps. Not the whole album, but it's got some good material on there. A couple little gems.
Yeah, there's really only 2 songs on this whole album that I want to listen to, and it's a long album. it's a full length album, and that's it's a bummer.
Yeah, it really is. It's a bummer because I really love old Specimen and just their original lineup and the energy that they had. I do really feel like they were a band that had potential. I don't know how serious music was to them. Whether or not they really cared if they continued or not. So whenever that's the case, I feel like you kind of have a similar situation.
Yeah, kind of a bummer note to go on, but
it is.
But yeah,
I will say we go out on a more positive note. I think that Specimen, whether you think that they deserve the goth moniker or not, I think that they're a really interesting band to listen to, really fun band to listen to. I would, like we mentioned, definitely recommend the Azoic or the other compilation album from that year, just to get all of the material together.
Yeah.
Catastrophe is very easy to pick up if you want something that's, original, old school Specimen.
Yep.
Great band that unfortunately took a sad turn.
Yep. And
I still love them, but I can't back their newer material with the exception of the live album.
Yep, I won't lie. I won't lie about some. Even if it's got the original members and a cool cover, and I can't say I like it that much.
Yeah.
So that's Specimen. Hopefully, they're kind of vague with their status.
Yeah.
So
it'd be cool if there's a reunion again, like they go back on tour. If maybe Johnny Slut decides to come out of retirement.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, he's been out for a few years now, so
he has. But I don't know. They coaxed him to come out of retirement once.
I guess it's true. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode and us talking about Specimen. I know it's been requested by many of you, and I hope it was worth it.
Yeah,
it was kind of a weird episode to do just because we had to figure out how we and what albums we were gonna do, and and who was on what albums, and but yeah, I thought it was fun, and of course, GothCast is brought to you in part by the Belfry.
Yep. The Belfry is a podcast network with various links to blogs and YouTube channels, but primarily is for hosting podcasts. And so you can find podcasts like The Requiem or Cemetery Confessions. Of course, you can find us on there.
And GothCast.
Yep. You can find Horror Addicts.
And GothCast.
It really is a good way to
find GothCast.
Find GothCast. Yeah. Find GothCast. But seriously, it is a good, means of finding, goth music and goth culture, whether you're a veteran of the community or someone who's new. Yeah. It's a great way to get into goth and to find stuff on there. Definitely recommended.
Yeah, actually sometimes the podcasts do crossovers. Like the count was just on Horror Addicts.
Yep.
It's really interesting. So.
And we were on, Cemetery Confessions
with the count. So just take a look. There's lots of good stuff on there. And of course, if you want to connect with GothCast on all your social media needs, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr.
All just GothCast.
Yep, GothCast, GothCast. On Twitter, it is _GothCast_. I swear to God, I'm going to change that. I swear to God, I'm going to do it one of these days. And
of course, we have our website, which is probably the easiest way to find all of our material because that's pretty much where we aggregate all our content.
Yep.
And that's gothcastradio.com. No www because why would we do that?
No spaces, all one word.
Yep.
GothCast Radio. And of course, if you want to find some of our YouTube videos, which come out every single week, at least one, it is GothCast Video on YouTube, or you can, it's like youtube.com/user/GothCast Video or something like that.
There's a space in there, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
GothCast space video.
Yeah. So look up GothCast.
Yep. And of course, if you want to send us an email, we have our email account, which is gothcastradio@gmail.com. Of course, we're always happy to respond to comments, questions, requests on any of these mediums. We try to respond to everything as best we can.
Yeah, we love talking to you guys.
Yep.
I know it sounded like I was yawning there. It's not because of you guys.
He was just a yawn.
Yeah, it was just a yawn. But we love talking to you guys. And we try to give you lots of ways to do it. Yep. So, as always, stay spooky.